The war was invisible, a silent battle of graphs and ghostly signals. Dr. Elias Vander intended to give it a voice. He stood in a Pentagon briefing room, a solitary figure of frantic intelligence before a wall of military brass. Their skepticism was a physical presence, thick as the cigar smoke hanging in the air. His proposal was not merely a new radar. It was a leap of faith in physics. A giant antenna, buried deep within the Greenland ice sheet, using the ancient, dense ice as a gigantic lens to see around the curvature of the Earth, to peer into the heart of the Soviet Union. The generals scoffed. They cited the impossible cold, the moving ice, the astronomical cost. But Vander was prepared. He presented his data like a priest delivering a sermon, his calm voice belying a fanatical fire in his eyes. He didn't just suggest it. He willed it into existence in their minds. He spoke of turning the Earth's own frozen shield into their ultimate weapon. He promised them not just an advantage, but divinity, the power to see all. He won his funding. But the real battle was just beginning. On the Greenland coast, humanity declared war on nature. The silence of the Arctic was shattered by the roar of icebreakers and the scream of steel drills biting into the glacier. Elias Vander was everywhere, his parka perpetually coated in a rime of frost, his eyes blazing with purpose. He was no longer just a scientist. He was a general commanding an army of engineers against the ice. The work was brutal. Men labored in a perpetual howling wind, their faces raw, their fingers numb. They called the project the Sphinx, a silent buried giant. And the ice fought back. During the excavation of the main antenna chamber, a sudden deafening crack echoed through the tunnels. A section of the ice roof, destabilized by the drilling, sheared off. There was no time for warning. The collapse was swift and brutal, a cascade of blue-white death that crushed machinery and buried a team of 6 men alive. The site fell into a stunned, horrified silence, broken only by the shifting ice and the frantic shouts of rescuers. They recovered only 2 bodies. The rest were entombed forever in the glacier. Major Koval, the military commander, stood over the wreckage, his face a mask of grim fury. He found Vander not mourning, but inspecting a core sample that had been exposed by the collapse, utterly detached from the human tragedy. 6 men, Vander. Koval's voice was low and dangerous. They're gone. This environment is hostile, unpredictable. Vander looked up, his gaze disturbingly clear. The ice is a medium, Major. It has properties, stress fractures. We miscalculated the load-bearing capacity in this sector. The data is now corrected. He gestured to the frozen grave as if it were a failed experiment. Their sacrifice provides a crucial variable. The lens must be anchored deeper. It makes the structure stronger. Koval stared, seeing not a genius, but a monster. He saw a man so consumed by his vision that human life had become a data point. Months later, deep within the heart of the glacier, the control room of the Sphinx hummed with tension. The massive lens was powered up, its energy a subsonic rumble felt in the bones. On the main screen, static danced. Then a clean, sharp blip materialized. A Soviet missile test, launched from the other side of the world. The ice lens tracked it with impossible clarity, painting its entire trajectory across the screen as if it were a child's drawing. The room erupted in cheers, a release of years of pent-up fear and strain. They had done it. They had conquered the impossible. Elias Vander allowed himself a smile, a thin, cold thing. He had proven his godhood. But as the cheers faded, a new sound emerged. A deep, resonant, groan, coming not from the machines, but from the ice itself. It was the sound of a sleeping giant, stirred. It was the sound of the mountain shifting its weight, objecting to the parasite in its heart. Everyone heard it. The celebration died instantly. Vander's smile didn't falter. He turned to his console, already analyzing the harmonic frequencies, muttering about structural resonance. He saw a new problem to be solved. Major Koval looked up at the groaning ceiling, then at Vander's oblivious back. In that moment, he knew the truth. They hadn't conquered the ice. They had woken it up. And the real war was just beginning. The triumph of the ice lens was short-lived. It was replaced by a new, constant state of siege. The deep, resonant groans did not cease. They became the station's background music, a perpetual reminder that their cathedral of steel was built inside a living, shifting entity that tolerated their presence less with each passing day. At first, the issues were logistical nuisances. Doorways became misaligned, jamming shut. Conduits running along the ice walls were sheared off, causing localized power failures. Vander's team worked around the clock, welding supports, rerouting cables, perpetually fighting a losing battle against the glacier's immense, slow-motion pressure. But then the psychological warfare began. The groans were joined by other sounds. Sharp, explosive cracks that echoed through the tunnels like gunshots, sending crews diving for cover, only to find nothing. Worse were the whispers. A low, almost melodic hum that seemed to filter through the ice itself, felt more than heard. It invaded dreams, frayed nerves, and made concentration impossible. Men started wearing earplugs, but the vibrations traveled through the very deck plates, up through the soles of their boots. Major Koval watched his crew deteriorate. The confident engineers and soldiers were now jumpy, pale, and irritable. He maintained discipline with a firm hand, but he saw the fear in their eyes during the endless Arctic night, simulated by the station lights. He knew the real enemy wasn't outside. It was the creeping dread within their own walls. He confronted Vander in the control room, which had become the scientist's sanctum. The main screen still displayed the breathtaking reach of the lens, a stark contrast to the crumbling reality around them. "The men are breaking, Vander," Koval stated, his voice tight. "This environment is unsustainable. We need to petition for a phased evacuation, a plan to decommission the lens before it decommissions us." Vander didn't look away from his screens, which showed real-time stress simulations of the ice pressure. "The environment is simply data, Major. Unstable, yes, but predictable with enough processing power. The whispers are just piezoelectric discharges from ice crystals under stress. It's a fascinating phenomenon. Tell that to the technician who tried to claw his way out of an airlock because he said the ice was singing to him," Koval shot back, his composure cracking. "We're losing our minds down here, and you're cataloging phenomena." Vander finally turned, his eyes gleaming with an unnerving mix of exhaustion and excitement. "Don't you see? This is part of the discovery. The lens isn't just for looking out. The ice is a recording medium. These stresses, these sounds, we're listening to the memory of the glacier itself. Centuries of pressure, of shifts. It's all right here." Koval stared, horrified. The man was no longer just obsessed. He was merging with his creation, losing the distinction between science and madness. The breaking point came subtly, then all at once. The flawless data stream from the lens began to glitch. Phantom signatures appeared, Entire squadrons of bombers that vanished a second later. Missile launches from the middle of the Pacific Ocean. At first, they were dismissed as system errors, the result of the constant seismic tremors. But then, the lens painted a target of such horrifying clarity that it froze the blood of every person in the control room. It showed a massive, impossible object. A city of angular, non-terrestrial geometry buried not just under the ice, but deep within the Earth's crust, directly beneath their feet. The readouts showed a material composition that defied all known elements. It was dormant, cold, and ancient, beyond comprehension. For a full minute, the room was silent, the only sound the ever-present groan of the ice. Vander's face was transfixed, not with fear, but with rapture. "Do you see?" he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "We weren't just building a radar. We were building a door. And we've been knocking." The main lights flickered and died, plunging the Sphinx into emergency red illumination. Alarms blared. A new sound joined the symphony of ice, a deep, rhythmic, mechanical thrumming that was utterly alien. It was not coming from their machines. It was coming from below. It was an answer. The alien thrumming was a drill to the soul. It vibrated up from the deep ice, a low-frequency pulse that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the chest cavity. A feeling of primal dread. In the blood-red emergency lights, the control room was a tableau of terror. Technicians clutched their consoles, their faces etched with a fear that was no longer about structural collapse, but of the utterly unknown. Elias Vander was the only one moving with purpose. His eyes were wide, shining with a terrifying ecstasy. He shouted orders to his core team of loyalists, commanding them to reroute all non-essential power to the lens's deep scanning array. "It's a signal, a resonant frequency. We need to amplify it, map the source structure," he yelled, his voice cracking with excitement. Major Koval slammed his hand down on Vander's console. "You will shut it down, Vander, now. That is an order. You are actively pinging an unidentified, potentially hostile entity buried under 2 miles of ice with us." Vander looked at him as if he were a child interrupting a grand symphony. "Hostile? Major, we are on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history. This is not a weapon. It is a library, a record, and we have just found the key." The argument was severed by a deafening crack that dwarfed all previous sounds. It was the sound of the world breaking. The entire station shuddered violently. From the central access tunnel, a spray of icy water shot out, followed by the shriek of twisting metal. The main structural support for the residential wing, compromised by the shifting ice and the alien vibrations, had finally snapped. The station's integrity alarm wailed, a new, more urgent sound reserved for catastrophic hull breach. The ice was no longer groaning. It was screaming. Koval didn't wait. He grabbed the intercom. "All personnel, abandon secondary sectors. Seal bulkheads Alpha through Gamma. This is not a drill. Move to the central core and prepare for emergency surface evacuation." His voice was a rock in the storm. Men and women trained for this moment scrambled into action. But Vander's scientific team hesitated, looking to their leader. "No!" Vander roared, tearing the intercom from Koval's hand. "If we lose primary power, we lose the lens. We lose the signal. We will be blind and deaf at the moment of first contact. You are condemning humanity to ignorance." Koval drew his sidearm. The click of the safety being released was a small, sharp sound that cut through the chaos. He didn't point it at Vander, but the message was clear. My mission is to protect American lives and assets, Doctor. You are currently a threat to both. Stand down." For a long moment, they were locked in a standoff, the military man and the mad prophet. The station groaned around them, and the deep thrumming from below seemed to intensify, as if observing their discord. It was a junior technician, his face pale, who broke the silence. "The breach. It's flooded Tunnel 3. The emergency generators are there. We've lost 70% of our power." The main lights died completely, leaving only the frantic glow of the control panels. The giant radar screen flickered and went dark. The deep, alien thrumming ceased abruptly, as if a switch had been thrown. The silence it left behind was more terrifying than the noise. Vander stared at the dead screen, his life's work, his godhood, extinguished. His body seemed to deflate. The fanatical light in his eyes didn't die, but it curdled into something colder, harder. Resignation mixed with a profound, seething fury. Koval lowered his weapon. The immediate battle was won. He began barking coordinates, organizing the survivors for the long, desperate climb to the surface through the damaged escape shafts. He didn't see the look on Vander's face as the scientist slowly turned from the dead console. Vander looked not at the men he had doomed, but at the dark, icy floor, as if he could see through it to the slumbering city below. He had not lost his faith. He had simply been betrayed by fragile, fearful men. The lens was gone, but the key, he knew, was still there, and he would find another way to turn it. The central core of the Sphinx had become a tomb of frozen steel and broken men. 23 survivors huddled in the frigid darkness, their breath pluming in the beam of Major Koval's single working flashlight. The air was thinning, the carbon dioxide building into a toxic blanket. The only sounds were the ragged breathing of the crew and the intermittent, gunshot cracks of the dying station. Elias Vander sat apart from them, his back against a dead control panel. He was not despondent. He was calculating. His eyes were fixed on the ice wall, seeing not the encroaching doom, but the patterns in its crystalline structure. The alien thrumming was gone, but the memory of it was etched into his mind. He knew it was not a weapon. It was a language. A test. "The escape shaft is blocked," a soot-streaked engineer reported to Koval, his voice hollow. "The collapse is total. We can't get back to the surface. We're trapped." A wave of pure despair washed over the group. Whimpers turned into quiet sobs. They were entombed. Koval refused to accept it. There has to be another way. A maintenance conduit, a ventilation shaft. "The ice has taken it all, Major," the engineer whispered. "The station is being crushed. It's just a matter of time." It was then that Vander spoke, his voice calm, eerily clear in the gloom. "There is another way." All eyes turned to him. In the stark flashlight beam, he looked like a ghost, his face gaunt, his eyes burning. "The signal wasn't random noise," he continued, standing slowly. "It was a key, a resonant frequency, the entity below us. It doesn't communicate with words. It communicates with structure, with harmonic vibration." Koval stared, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. "Vander, whatever you're thinking, stop." "We tried to look at it with the lens," Vander said, ignoring him, a mad professor lecturing his captive audience. "That was our arrogance. We tried to see, but it doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be heard. It wants to be felt." He walked to the main power coupling for the core, a massive conduit-filled hub that was now dark. "We don't need the lens. We just need a speaker. A single focused burst of the same frequency, channeled directly into the ice. A response. An acknowledgement. "You'll bring the whole mountain down on us," Koval shouted, stepping forward. "Or it will recognize us," Vander shot back, his composure finally breaking into raw fervor. "It will see that we understand. It could stop the collapse. It could save us. It is our only chance." It was a lie wrapped around a kernel of his truth. Vander didn't care about salvation. He cared about the handshake. He needed to complete the circuit. A schism tore through the survivors. The terrified, those who saw only madness, clung to Koval. But others, those who had given up hope, saw a final desperate gamble in Vander's eyes. They were the ones who had seen the city on the screen, who had felt the awe mixed with their fear. They chose the prophet over the soldier. A fight erupted in the cramped space, not a disciplined struggle, but a frantic, ugly brawl of desperate men. Koval fought like a demon, but he was outnumbered by Vander's converts. He was beaten, disarmed, and pinned against the wall, watching in horror as Vander and his followers began manually rewiring the station's emergency battery, the last of their power, into the main structural interface that was bolted directly into the bedrock ice. "This is how you talk to a god," Vander whispered, his hands moving with a surgeon's precision. He threw the final switch. There was no sound at first. Then a low hum began, not from the machinery, but from the ice itself. The entire chamber began to vibrate, a gentle, almost soothing resonance. The violent cracking ceased. For a breathtaking moment, it seemed he was right. It was working. Then the floor turned transparent. It wasn't glass. It was as if the rock and ice had simply become a window. And below them, stretching into an impossible depth, was the city. It was vast, geometric, built of a material that drank the light. And it was no longer dormant. Pinpricks of cold blue light ignited across its spires and causeways, tracing patterns that hurt the mind to follow. A wave of pure information, not as sight or sound, but as direct experience, flooded up through the transparent floor and into their minds. It was not a welcome. It was an assessment, a cold galactic-scale audit of their consciousness. Men screamed, clutching their heads, their identities dissolving in the torrent. Vander stood at the center of it, his arms wide, a blissful smile on his face, as the data stream annihilated his sanity. He was communing. And then, as swiftly as it came, it stopped. The floor was solid again. The blue lights in the depths winked out. The hum vanished. Silence. The survivors who had opposed Vander were catatonic, curled on the floor. His followers were dead, their eyes wide and empty, brains fried by the overload. Only Vander and the battered Koval remained conscious. Vander turned to Koval, his expression one of serene, utter madness. "You see?" he slurred, a trickle of blood from his nose. "I was right." A final definitive crack echoed through the core. Not from the ice, but from the ceiling above Koval. A support beam, fatigued beyond its limit, sheared free. Vander didn't try to move. He just watched it fall. The impact was brutal and final. The Sphinx fell silent. The only light was Koval's flashlight, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air over Vander's crushed body. The conversation was over. Silence. It was the first true silence Major Koval had experienced since the ice began to groan. It was not peaceful. It was the silence of a grave. The red emergency lights were dead. The only illumination came from his flashlight, its beam trembling in his hand. The air was frigid and stank of ozone, blood, and voided bowels. He was alone. Around him lay the fallen, Vander's converts, their faces frozen in a rictus of transcendent terror. His own men, their minds shattered by the psychic onslaught, now sat motionless, breathing in shallow, useless breaths. And Vander himself, a broken prophet, crushed beneath the weight of his own hubris. A dark stain spreading across the deck beneath the fallen girder. Koval's body screamed in protest as he pushed himself upright. Every breath was a knife in his ribs. He was the last sentient thing in this frozen hell. His training screamed at him to secure the area, to tend to the wounded, to report. But there was nothing to secure. The wounded were beyond help. There was no one to report to. He stumbled through the carnage, his boots crunching on frozen debris. His mission was a catastrophic failure. The asset was destroyed. The crew was lost. But a deeper, more primal instinct took over. Survive. He remembered the escape shaft, the one they said was blocked. It was his only chance. He moved on autopilot, navigating the familiar, now deformed corridors by memory. The station was a corpse, its metal bones picked clean by the ice. He found the shaft. The engineer had been right. It was sealed by a massive plug of blue ice, a glacier's final definitive statement. He was trapped. He sank to his knees, the cold of the deck seeping through his trousers. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of glory, but in the slow, quiet dark, entombed in a failed dream. He closed his eyes, waiting for the cold to take him. Then a sound. Faint. Metallic. His eyes snapped open. It was coming from the ice plug itself. A ticking, then a scraping. A fine crack appeared in the pristine surface, glowing with a faint, artificial orange light. With a sudden, shattering crack, a drill bit the size of a man's fist burst through the center of the ice. It was followed by others, methodically boring out a circle. A section of the ice plug fell inward, and blinding white light flooded the dark tunnel. A figure silhouetted by the light, clad in a modern white Arctic survival suit, stepped through the hole. More followed. They moved with a quiet, efficient purpose Koval recognized all too well. A voice filtered through a comms unit spoke. "Major Koval? U.S. Northern Command. We're here for you." He was dragged, numb and uncomprehending, into the light. He was on the surface. The wind howled, but the sun, weak and low on the horizon, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They loaded him into the heated cabin of a tracked vehicle. As they sped away, Koval looked back through the frost-rimed window. He expected to see the ruined dome of the Sphinx's entrance. He saw nothing but a vast, unbroken plain of white. "The station," he croaked. The team leader followed his gaze. "Gone, sir. The whole complex collapsed in on itself decades ago. We've been monitoring the site via satellite for years. Picked up your life sign a week ago. We thought it was a ghost signal." Koval stared. Decades? He had been down there for days, weeks at most. The entity, the communion. It had done something to time, to his perception. The vehicle crested a ridge. Below them lay a sprawling, state-of-the-art research facility, a city of geodesic domes and antenna arrays. It was built directly over the burial site. The team leader noticed his stare. "The Anomaly Research Station," he explained. "After your project was lost, the data you sent about the subsurface structure was deemed too valuable to ignore. We just found a safer way to listen." Inside a warm, brightly lit laboratory, a young scientist offered Koval a blanket and a tablet. On the screen was a real-time geological scan. It showed the familiar angular silhouette of the alien city, deep below the ice. It was still there, dormant once more. But superimposed over the scan were new data points, fluctuating energy signatures, rhythmic, low-frequency pulses. They were subtle, but they were there. The scientist pointed at the screen, his voice filled with the familiar, chilling excitement. "It's the strangest thing, sir. For years it was silent. But recently, it started whispering again. It's almost as if it's asking a question. And thanks to the groundwork of your Dr. Vander, we're finally close to understanding the language." Koval looked from the scientist's eager face to the pulsating data on the screen. He saw the same fanatical spark he had seen in Vander's eyes. The cycle was not broken. It was beginning again. They had not learned a thing. He turned away from the screen and walked to the window, looking out at the endless, unforgiving ice. He had escaped the tomb, only to find a larger one being built around him. He was the sole survivor, the keeper of a terrible warning that no one wanted to hear. The Sphinx was gone. But its riddle remained, and humanity was still trying to answer it, blind to the cost.